Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. She tried to steal my family's 600-acre farm while I was on vacation, planted fake signs, forged documents, even started building roads. What she didn't know? I'd set the perfect legal trap before I left. This isn't just a story about land, it's about revenge served Texas style. They say, land remembers. And if that's true, then every inch of my 600-acre farm has a memory of my family etched into it. Hoof prints from generations of cattle, hand-dug fence posts, and the laughter of kids racing down dirt paths on bikes that barely held together. I'm James Randall, 43 years old, farmer by blood, bone, and every damn callus on my hands. My great-grandfather homesteaded this land in 1894, carved a life out of wild Texas brush and stubborn soil. He passed it to my father, and my father to me. This farm isn't just property, it's legacy. For most of my life, things stayed simple. Our land lay just outside the edge of town, peaceful, untouched, with rolling pastures, a creek-fed pond, and a forest patch thick enough to lose your troubles in. Then came Meadow Lake Estates. About a year ago, a developer broke ground just across the main road. I watched from my porch as the first wave of bulldozers rolled in, leveling mesquite trees and pouring concrete like they were trying to scrub the land clean of personality. Cookie-cutter homes sprouted up faster than weeds after a rain. Every one of them painted beige with a picket fence and a forced smile. And smack in the middle of it all was the queen bee herself, Karen Baker, self-declared president of the newly formed HOA. Karen was the kind of woman who looked like she ordered her personality off a corporate website. Crisp, polished, and dangerous in a PTA meets dictatorship way. The first time we met, she showed up at my gate in a perfectly tailored pantsuit, holding a clipboard like it was a sword. She introduced herself with a rehearsed smile and handed me a pamphlet titled Harmonizing Properties, A Guide to Visual Cohesion. I blinked at it and said, "Ma'am, my cows don't read brochures." She didn't laugh. From that moment on, she had it in for me. Letters started arriving. The first was a friendly notice suggesting I repaint my barn to better match the evolving aesthetics of the area. The barn in question was over 80 years old and held up by more honor than nails. Then came complaints about the unsightly livestock noises at dawn. "It's a farm, Karen. That's called nature's alarm clock." Things escalated quickly. One afternoon, I caught two teenagers flying a drone over my cattle pasture. Turns out Karen had asked her neighbor's kid to survey visual inconsistencies on the perimeter. I waved it off at first. Maybe it was just HOA overreach. But then she started showing up with suggestions for merging our fencing lines and creating a community greenbelt corridor that would, surprise, cut right through my best grazing field. She even once asked if I'd ever considered the tax advantages of parcel donation. I told her the only thing I'd be donating was a boot print if she ever stepped foot past my fence uninvited. You see, the real danger with people like Karen isn't that they want control. It's that they think they already have it. I was starting to feel like a lone sheriff in a town that hadn't realized the outlaws were already moving in. That's when I started preparing, quietly, thoroughly, because a storm was brewing. And while Karen thought she was playing chess, she didn't realize I'd already set the board. After months of snide letters, unwanted visits, and drone flybys from Karen's little HOA empire, I knew one thing for certain. Peace wasn't going to come from pretending this was all just a misunderstanding. No, this was targeted. And it was only going to get worse. That's when I decided we needed a break. My wife Rachel had been saying it for months. Let's take the kids somewhere, even just for a week. So we did one better. We planned 2 full weeks at my buddy Cole's ranch up in Wyoming. Fresh air, fresh faces, and no HOA presidents with superiority complexes in sight. But I wasn't leaving without preparing for war. I'm not a paranoid man, but I've seen what people with too much time and too little jurisdiction can do. Karen didn't want friendship. She wanted expansion. Every polite word she said was just cover for a slow, creeping grab at control. And if I left without locking things down, I had no doubt she'd take my absence as an invitation. So I started building my safety net. First, I went to the county office and reconfirmed our property lines, all 600 acres down to the inch. I had the surveyor update everything digitally, geotag it with satellite overlays, and file it under both state agricultural protection status and historical land classification. That alone added layers of bureaucracy no HOA committee would want to touch without a swarm of lawyers. Next, I met with my attorney, Lucas Sharp, smart, mean in court, and polite enough to make people nervous. Together, we crafted a notarized directive. If anything happened on my land, trespass, construction, or even signage placement, he had full authority to file for immediate injunctive relief and initiate a civil claim for unlawful encroachment. No need to wait for me, just pull the trigger. I also added a wrinkle most people wouldn't think of. I registered the farm as a protected agricultural trust with an inherited land clause. That meant any attempted change in land status, zoning, ownership, or usage required court approval even if it was forged. It was like installing a legal landmine. Finally, I installed some hardware. I'm talking motion sensors at the far edges of the fence, pressure pads under the gravel at the west entrance, and a few solar-powered trail cams disguised as birdhouses. Even had a buddy from the volunteer fire department help wire up a solar battery backup for the house system, just in case someone got cute with the power lines. Rachel raised an eyebrow when she saw me zip-tying one of the cameras to a fence post. "You prepping for the apocalypse or just HOA?" I smirked. With Karen, I'm not sure there's a difference. Before we rolled out, I handed everything, documents, footage backups, authorization letters, to Lucas in a sealed envelope labeled simply, "If Karen gets ideas." And just as we were packing up the truck, I paused at the edge of the porch and looked out over the pastures. The cows were chewing lazily. The barn stood quiet in the dusk. Everything was in place. If Karen made her move, I'd know, and she'd regret it. With one last look at the land my great-grandfather carved from dust, I muttered under my breath, "Try me, Karen." And we drove away. We'd only been in Wyoming a week. I was out by the grill with Cole, flipping steaks and talking cattle prices, when my phone buzzed with a message from Old Man Harvey, our nearest neighbor back home, and the unofficial keeper of all back fence gossip. It was a photo. Blurry, a little crooked, but unmistakable. A construction crew, right there, smack in the middle of my front field. Bright orange vests, yellow machinery, even one of those temporary HOA-style banner stands with a plastic map attached. I squinted. There it was, bold as sin. Meadow Lake Ranch Extension, Phase 1 development. I nearly dropped the tongs into the fire. Seconds later, Harvey called. "Jimbo, not to ruin your vacation, but you might want to come back and wrangle some folks off your land. They've got a backhoe chewing up your alfalfa like it's a buffet." And one of them just asked if I was ready to transition to a more modern subdivision aesthetic. I told him the only thing I'm transitioning is into a man with a shotgun if they touch my fence. Rachel overheard enough to know this wasn't a false alarm. My pulse was already pounding. Back at the house, while the kids packed and Rachel pulled up flights, I did a deep dive into the digital security feed I had synced to my tablet. Sure enough, there they were. Workers marking out lots with orange flags, surveyors spraying lines, and worst of all, new signage mounted on metal poles that hadn't been there a week ago. One of them read, "Welcome to Meadow Lake Ranch Extension. Private HOA property. Members only." I could feel my molars grinding as I switched camera views. There was a security guard leaning against one of my fences, wearing a Meadow Lake Estate security jacket and sipping coffee like he owned the sunrise. And then she appeared, Karen, in sunglasses, khaki slacks, and a branded Meadow Lake windbreaker, clipboard in hand, walking the property line like some kind of suburban Caesar. She was pointing out where the green space would go, right over my family's garden patch. I watched her gesture toward my barn, my grandfather's barn, then speak into her walkie-talkie. I don't know what she said, but the guy next to her nodded and started directing a bulldozer toward it. That's when I realized she wasn't just pushing boundaries, she thought she'd already won. My jaw locked so tight I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. They'd moved fast, too fast, faster than any legal operation ever should. But then again, people who know they're breaking the law tend to work quickly and sloppily. Turns out, Karen had filed a petition with the municipal zoning office claiming my property had been abandoned. She submitted fake affidavits signed by me and my wife, stating that we'd ceded the land to Meadow Lake Estates for a shared community initiative. To give it extra flair, she even attached a forged addendum saying we'd requested immediate HOA oversight during our absence to ease the transitional phase. There were even copies of our supposed signatures, which were laughable. Mine looked like someone tried to draw cursive with a crayon in their mouth. Rachel's was spelled wrong. Twice. They didn't just trespass. They tried to erase us. I couldn't believe the sheer audacity. In what universe did anyone think a 600-acre legacy farm could be folded into a suburban HOA like it was an abandoned pool house? But she thought I was out of reach. And that made her sloppy. She didn't know about the cameras. She didn't know about the motion alerts. She didn't know about the notarized landlock clause filed just weeks before. And she sure as hell didn't know I'd left the legal equivalent of a landmine, waiting for anyone dumb enough to cross the line. So as Karen installed her fake signs and her bulldozer traced a line through my clover field, she didn't realize she was standing squarely inside a legal trap with a blinking red light. And, oh, I couldn't wait to spring it. We pulled into the long gravel driveway at dawn, dust curling in the red morning light, the familiar creak of the front gate groaning open like the land itself had been holding its breath. But the second we crested the rise, I knew the worst was true. There were signs everywhere. Large white placards with green and gold lettering. Meadow Lake Ranch Extension, future site of HOA lifestyle amenities. Someone had the gall to staple one right onto our century-old wooden fence like it was a damn bulletin board. My barn had orange tape around it like a crime scene. My pasture had been carved into crude plots with spray-painted numbers. A surveyor's drone buzzed low overhead, as if we were cattle waiting for slaughter. But the final straw, there in the center of the field where my kids used to play football every fall, stood a portable HOA kiosk with a uniformed teenager handing out brochures. I stopped the truck, slowly opened the door, and stepped out like I was walking onto a battlefield. Rachel stayed silent. The kids peeked out from the back seat, wide-eyed. Even Dagger, our old shepherd, let out a low growl. Then I saw her, Karen Baker, standing beside a cement truck, hair pinned up, designer sunglasses perched like a crown. She was holding a Starbucks cup and barking orders into her phone, gesturing toward my barn like she was planning its demolition during brunch. I walked right up, slow and steady. She noticed me halfway through her monologue and froze. Then, that awful patronizing smile crept across her face like oil on water. "Oh, Mr. Randall, back so soon. We weren't expecting you for another week. But it's perfect timing. We've made some amazing progress already. You'll love the new layout." I didn't say a word, just handed her a crisp envelope, my legal notice, then turned to wave down the black SUV that was just pulling onto the gravel road behind me. Lucas Sharp, my lawyer, stepped out first, followed by Deputy Marshal Griggs, a towering man with the patience of a cactus and the authority of a wrecking ball. Behind them came Judge Hamilton's clerk, holding an official court order like it was a sword of divine justice. Karen's smile faltered. Lucas walked right past her and pinned a copy of the emergency injunction to the HOA kiosk. Another went on the cement mixer. Griggs, meanwhile, addressed the construction crew. "All work on this property is hereby ordered to cease immediately. Any machinery remaining on site within the next hour will be impounded as evidence in an ongoing criminal investigation." Karen finally found her voice. "This is absurd. This is all a huge misunderstanding. We have the paperwork. He gave us permission. There's a transfer of ownership." Lucas cut her off like a hot knife through margarine. "You forged land transfer documents with signatures from people who were either on vacation or, in one case, dead since 2009. You think the county clerk doesn't verify those?" Karen's face went from defiant to pale in seconds. I stepped up beside Lucas, locking eyes with her. "You trespassed. You vandalized. You illegally claimed 600 acres of my family's legacy to expand your HOA playground. You thought I was just some dumb farmer on vacation. But I was 10 steps ahead before I even packed my bags." By now, workers were packing tools in silence. The teen manning the HOA booth slipped off his name tag and disappeared into a truck. Griggs turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, you are hereby advised that you are being investigated for forgery, fraud, criminal trespass, and conspiracy to unlawfully seize property. You may want to call your attorney, preferably one better than whoever gave you the genius idea to sign over land you don't own." Karen sputtered, but the words never made it out. She looked around, realized no one was backing her up, not even her clipboard-holding lackeys, and finally backed away from the scene, eyes darting like a cornered possum. Lucas patted me on the shoulder. "We're just getting started." I nodded, still staring at the signs, the flags, the fake promises of townhomes and shared green zones. Then I turned and walked toward my porch, slow, deliberate, kicking over a Meadow Lake sign as I passed. This was still my land, and now the whole county knew it. Courtrooms smell like dust and old wood, like justice has to fight its way through history just to breathe. The morning of the hearing, the county courthouse was packed tighter than the feed shed in winter. News crews were camped on the steps. Locals leaned over the railing, murmuring. Someone even sold kettle corn outside. It wasn't just a land dispute anymore. It was the trial of the century, and everyone wanted a front row seat. Karen showed up in her usual pageant armor, power blazer, flawless hair, and a rolling suitcase probably stuffed with excuses and denial. She flanked herself with two lawyers, both dressed like catalog models and radiating misplaced confidence. You could tell they'd never set foot in rural court before. One even wore loafers on a farm case. Bless his heart. I sat next to Lucas, calm on the outside, firestorm on the inside. Rachel squeezed my hand. My father, wearing his best bolo tie and boots polished so hard you could see your sins in them, nodded to me from the row behind. Judge Hamilton entered with a gavel crack that echoed like thunder in an old barn. He was a no-nonsense kind of man with a silver beard and a look that could curdle milk. "Let's get one thing straight from the jump," he said, fixing Karen's table with the intensity of a branding iron. "We are here to determine whether a private citizen's 600-acre farm was illegally claimed by a homeowners association through forged documents, false filings, and trespass. So I hope y'all came prepared to prove miracles." Karen's attorney rose. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit." "Sit," said the judge, not looking up. "We'll get there. Mr. Randall, to the stand." I took the oath, sat down, and told the truth, the full truth, every rotten detail from Karen's first friendly suggestion to the day I pulled into my driveway and found bulldozers chewing up family soil. Lucas then projected photos from our security system, time-stamped, GPS tagged. The jury leaned in. Then came the signed forms, dozens of them, Karen's evidence of my consent. Lucas handed one to the judge. "Your Honor, please direct your attention to Exhibit C, the deed transfer dated July 5th, and bearing the signatures of James Randall and Miss Eleanor Randall." The courtroom hushed. My stomach nodded. Eleanor Randall, Lucas continued slowly, was Mr. Randall's grandmother. She passed away in 2009. He let that sink in, then stepped toward the jury box like a preacher walking an aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you plainly, where did the president of Meadow Lake Estates get the signature of a woman who's been dead for 16 years? You could have heard a pin drop or Karen's soul exiting her body. She looked like someone had cut the power to her operating system." The judge lowered his glasses and turned to her. "Ma'am, would you like to explain?" Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her lawyer started to speak, but the judge cut him off. "Oh, you hush. I want to hear it from the source. Did you or did you not submit fraudulent property documents to this court and to the county assessor's office claiming ownership of land you had no legal right to?" Karen blinked, swallowed. "There may have been a clerical error." Laughter erupted from the gallery. Judge Hamilton banged the gavel. "One more outburst and I'll clear the room, though I admit that was one of the more imaginative euphemisms for felony forgery I've heard." Lucas wasn't done. He brought in our forensic handwriting expert, some quiet lady with a microscope and a laser pointer, and she laid out a brutal timeline showing how every one of Karen's transfers had been digitally manipulated, traced from outdated property scans, and riddled with inconsistencies. Then came the coup de grace. We'd subpoenaed Meadow Lake HOA's internal emails. Buried in them was a message from Karen, sent 2 weeks before we left for Wyoming, titled simply, "Acquisition Plan, Randall Parcel." She'd literally labeled it Acquisition, like we were a shopping list. When that email went up on the projector, the jury collectively leaned back. One of them muttered, "Wow." The judge sighed like a man who'd seen too much. "That's enough," he said. "I've heard more than I care to. Miss Baker, you're facing criminal charges pending review, and this HOA is now subject to a civil penalty that will make your annual bake sale look like a bank robbery." He turned to me. "Mr. Randall, I hereby rule in your favor. All actions by the HOA are null and void. Your land remains solely and indisputably yours. I am also referring this matter to the district attorney for formal charges against Ms. Baker for fraud, trespassing, and conspiracy." I nodded. Not because I was happy. It wasn't joy I felt. It was justice and relief. As Karen was escorted out of the room, someone in the back whistled, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The judge didn't even stop them. The first morning after the trial, I sat on my porch swing with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sunrise creep over the barn roof like it was trying to apologize for the chaos. It was quiet, not suspicious quiet, earned quiet. The kind that settles over a place when justice finally does its job. Across the way, the once bustling Meadow Lake estates looked still. The construction crews were long gone, replaced by silence and sideways glances from neighbors too embarrassed to wave. I didn't blame them. Some of them had bought into Karen's gospel of growth, probably without knowing she was orchestrating a slow-motion land heist. Now they were just trying to figure out what HOA even stood for anymore. Harassment over agriculture, maybe? As for Karen, oh, she got what was coming. The sheriff's department booked her that same day after court. Charges pending for fraud, trespassing, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud private landowners. The local news ran her mugshot under the headline, Queen of HOA, caught in cattle country caper. My personal favorite was a meme that went viral. Karen's face photoshopped onto a cowgirl's body with the caption, tried to ride the ranch, got. Bucked by the law. The HOA itself imploded. Fines from the court drained their coffers faster than water through a cracked trough. Civil suits started piling in. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had strong-armed. At least 3 other families came forward with stories of threats, fines for imaginary violations, and one poor guy who got penalized for parking his RV facing the wrong direction. The county revoked their development permits. Meadow Lake's expansion project was dead. No new homes, no community greenbelt, and definitely no HOA sidewalk connecting to my property. My fences stayed up, my cows roamed free. And my land? Officially registered as a protected, privately held historical estate, immune to rezoning or annexation, Rachel started planting a new garden near the barn. The kids helped me repaint the front fence just because it felt right to give the old place a fresh coat after everything. Even Dagger seemed to walk with a little more pride. Lucas got offered a write-up in a legal magazine for the case. He politely declined and instead brought over a bottle of whiskey and said, "We ought to name that pasture after her. Karen's Folly." I laughed so hard I almost fell off the porch. One night, my dad rolled out his old record player. We sat under the stars with a couple of neighbors, folks who used to be on the fence, now firmly on our side. He put on Johnny Cash, cracked open a few cold ones, and said, "I always knew your stubborn streak would come in handy." The music crackled to life. Somewhere in the fields, a coyote howled like it was laughing along. We toasted to land, to legacy, and to the fact that sometimes the best revenge is doing absolutely nothing except sitting on your porch while the dust settles, the grass grows back, and the woman who tried to steal it all learns what it means to lose. A month after the dust settled, someone, I won't say who, but it might have been me, floated an idea at the farmer's market. Why not throw a little celebration? A sort of cathartic, county-style exorcism of all things HOA. Something loud, corny, and very, very public. 3 weeks later, we hosted the first annual Randall Farm Corn Festival, and buddy, it was a masterpiece of rural satire. We set up hay bales in a big circle out by the west field, right where Karen had once tried to build a community meditation space. Instead, we built a dunk tank and hung a life-sized cardboard cutout of her in front. The line for it stretched clear past the lemonade stand. One of the neighbors, a retired puppeteer named Glenn, made a talking scarecrow dressed like a HOA president, complete with miniature clipboard and a recorded loop saying, "Have you considered painting your barn beige?" Every time someone walked by, it added, "Violation noted." Kids ran wild in the corn maze shaped like the words private property. We even had a Guess That Forged signature booth with copies of Karen's fake documents. Winner got a custom mug that read, "I survived the HOA heist." My personal favorite, we repurposed the very same Meadow Lake Estates sign they'd tried to mount on my land, spray painted over it in bold red. "You are now entering Randall Farm. Last person who tried to steal it is paying us $250,000. Enjoy your corn." People took selfies with it like it was a national monument. Karen, of course, was nowhere in sight. Word had it she'd moved in with her sister 2 counties over while her trial crept along like molasses in January. Every now and then, someone would raise a toast and mutter, "To Meadow Lake," followed by a round of laughter and somebody snorting corn whiskey. As the sun dipped low, my dad climbed up on the flatbed stage and raised his hands. Folks, Sanahi said, we've had a hell of a year, but tonight, we're not just celebrating that the land stayed where it belongs. We're celebrating that when somebody tried to fence us in, we didn't fold, we hosted a festival. That's country justice. The crowd hollered. Someone started playing banjo. Kids lit sparklers. Rachel handed me a plate with cornbread, ribs, and pie, stacked like a patriotic tower. And as I looked out over my land, still mine, still free, I thought, maybe next year we'll make it a tradition. Because nothing says victory like sweet corn, good neighbors, and a dunk tank named Karen.